Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our Critical Foreign Languages Scholarship Information session today. My name is Shay Masterson. I am with the Office of National Scholarships Advisement, or ONSA, here at ASU. For those of you who may not know who we are or what we do, we are a department here that advises ASU students and alumni at all levels on dozens of external awards that are nationally or internationally funded. In today's instance, we're going to be talking about some that are funded by the U.S. federal government, although sometimes the funding entity is different, but they are from a national or international source. And that means the applicant pool is also from across the country and in some cases across the world, although with the today's awards we'll talk about are specifically for those within the United States. And then they are, especially for undergraduate students, although a number of the awards we advise on are for graduate students as well, they are really experiential. They're going to help you gain some kind of experience that will, yes, build your resume for whatever your future career path is, but also just really help build your skills, experience, and network as you're moving forward through whatever your academic and professional journey looks like. So these are experiences and opportunities that will be really transformational and in a lot of cases life-changing for you if you get selected for the opportunity. And with those kinds of awards that are, again, nationally or internationally funded, accepting applicants from across the country and sometimes across the world, and have that kind of experiential component and aren't just here's some money for money's sake for your schooling. We provide how our office comes in is we provide comprehensive advising from start to finish on these awards. So what that means is we do informational sessions and informational advising like this to help you learn about opportunities and identify which opportunities might make the most sense for you. But then beyond that, once you've decided to apply for any of those dozens of awards we advise on, we'll give you guidance and support through that entire application process. So that includes basic stuff like answering eligibility questions or answering application logistics questions, but also really getting into the meat of the application with you and giving you suggestions, tips, and feedback on all of the components of the application, especially the written components. If there's interviews involved with the application process, although there aren't on the two main ones we're going to talk about today, we'll also help you prepare for those interviews. We'll also then celebrate the wins and also commiserate about the losses with you. So really end-to-end support when it comes to pursuing any of these kinds of awards. That's what our office does and is here to support you with as an ASU undergraduate student, graduate student, or alumni. We are located on the Tempe campus in Honors Hall in the Tempe campus for any of you that are local and interested in visiting our physical space. But we serve all of ASU and therefore all of our advising, all of our support is also offered virtually, just as we're offering this information session virtually today. So that's a little bit about ONSA in case you're not familiar. Now let's get into the topic at hand for today, critical languages. So all of the scholarships we will talk about today specifically, although not all of the ones that we advise on in our office, are focused on helping you as a recipient learn or further learn a critical need language. And what we mean by that is that it's less commonly taught and known here in the United States, and that it has a relevant interest to U.S. national security and diplomacy. Okay, so the U.S. government has deemed these of particular interest to their national and international interests. So this typically means you're looking at non-Western European languages. A lot of times it's also not including Spanish. So they're really trying to help you learn some of these languages or advance your skills in some of these languages outside of those languages and regions. So we'll talk about two specific awards in depth today. The first one is the Boren Awards. This is a scholarship where you select a study abroad program in which you would learn a language, and it provides you with up to $30,000 of funding towards doing that study abroad program to enhance your language skills. So the study abroad program itself, language learning has to be an integral or primary part of the study abroad program that you've chosen. And it has to be for a language and a region of the world that is underrepresented in study abroad experiences and, again, critical to U.S. national interest. This is a program that's funded by the Department of Defense. So their explicit connection is that national security interest alignment with these languages. So they're typically not going to send you to Western Europe, Canada, Australia, or New Zealand. They will send you to Latin America, although if you're going for Spanish language and Latin American studies, there's a little bit more of a you have to be at a little bit more of an advanced level to make that case for going there to do that study abroad program. The Bourne Awards also is a pathway for you to federal employment if that's something that's of interest to you. If federal employment is not something that you are at all interested in, then Bourne may not be the award for you, but there's some others we'll talk about. But if it is something that has always piqued your interest or always been something that you definitely wanted to pursue, then Bourne could be a great avenue to get you there. So under the Bourne Awards, there's two different programs. There's the scholarship program and the fellowship program. The primary difference between these is who's eligible. So the scholarship program is specifically for current undergraduate students, and the fellowship is for current graduate students. Okay, so it's the main difference. From there, they both have a preference for you to be going for at least 6 months and up to a year in your study abroad program. If you are going for that length of time, then that makes you eligible for up to $25,000 in funding for your study abroad expenses. If you're going a little bit shorter, for 12 weeks or about 3 months to 6 months, then they will allow you to, but it's less preferred than the longer programs, and you would be eligible for less funding. So it's up to $12,500 in funding that you're eligible for. If you are an undergraduate student specifically, you are eligible to go for summer programs that are at least 8 weeks long, and you're eligible for up to $8,000 if you are going as a STEM student for a shorter term program. If you are a graduate student, they have an optional additional award of $5,000 that you can be eligible for to do domestic study before you embark on your abroad experience. Okay, so that's where you get up to the $30,000. So those are kind of the slight differences in the two scholar or fellow program. You can apply for either one depending on where you're at academically. To be eligible, you do have to be a U.S. citizen or national at the time of your application. It's funded by the Department of Defense. That is oftentimes a requirement for awards that they offer or fund. And you do have to be planning, again, to study a critical foreign language to a world region that is eligible. Again, so typically not Western Europe, not the US or Canada, not Australia or New Zealand, hopefully for obvious reasons why you wouldn't be studying critical languages in those places. But that has to be your plans for your study abroad program. You do have to be enrolled both now and while you're abroad as an undergraduate or graduate student. So there is a slight workaround for this. So you can apply for it any time in undergraduate or graduate studies as long as you're currently enrolled and will be enrolled the following year while you go abroad. The only caveat there is if you are a graduating senior, you can still apply to the Boren Awards for the following year. And what happens is the university will keep you in matriculated status at the university after you complete your graduation requirements, after you walk in your graduation ceremony, and until you return from your Boren experience. So you do all of the things for graduation, and then your degree just doesn't get conferred to you until you return from the Boren experience. So it's a known loophole to the requirement of being a currently enrolled student at the undergraduate or graduate level to be eligible. This is just a map to give you a kind of visual of their destinations that you can go to and can't go to on a Boren Award. There is a full list on their website, but I think the visual gives you a sense of that. But if you're not sure who the specific country you're looking at or considering, you can always look on the website for that more detailed list. But just to give you an idea, on this map, the gray destinations are a no-go. Boren will not fund you going to any of the gray destinations. The green ones are unrestricted, means that you can likely go to these countries. However, if you are going to one of these countries to specifically study Arabic, Mandarin, or Russian, you may have to, or you will have to select an alternate program in a alternate destination, just because there might be some concerns there with studying that language in that destination. The ones that are labeled in blue currently means you will probably not be able to go to those countries in the following year. Okay. And then yellow is non-preferred. So you can apply for a Boren Award to go to the yellow destinations to study the languages there, but you will have to make a very clear case for why going to that country and learning that language is of interest to U.S. national security. So the ones in the blue, they've kind of already the green, they've already kind of determined they're on board. These languages are very critical to U.S. interests. The ones in yellow, they're less convinced of, and you kind of have to convince them of that in your application. So I said earlier that Boren is a pathway to federal employment, and what that means is that they actually require you to work for the federal government for at least 1 year after you're done with your academic studies. They do give you kind of some leeway, so it can be up to 3 years after your academic studies are completed before you fulfill this requirement. And of course, you can work for the federal government longer than that, but you do have to work with them for a minimum of 1 year, and it has to be in a role that is related to national security. So it's not just working for them in any capacity, but something that has some kind of alignment for national security. They do pretty broadly define that, but they have a preference for the Department of State, Homeland Security, Department of Defense, and the intelligence agencies. Okay, so you don't have to go to work for one of those agencies, but most Boren alumni do work for one of those four. And if it's not one of those four, again, you're going to have to make what that clear alignment is with national security interests are. They also provide you with support in pursuing that federal employment when the time comes. They don't guarantee you any positions, but they do give you support in applying for relevant jobs. There are some special initiatives under the Boren umbrella in which they do give preference to individuals who are applying under one of these initiatives. So there's the African Flagship Languages Initiative and the Southeast Asian Flagship Language Initiative. Between these two, there are about 10 different programs in specific countries in Southeast Asia and Africa for specific languages in those countries, where they have already a program in place. And if you apply for one of those initiatives, then you're given preference, and you also don't have to kind of find your own study abroad program to learn the language, which is typically what you do for a Boren Award. They also have a preference for those who are participating currently in a language flagship program. So as an ASU student, that would specifically be the Chinese flagship program, which we're going to talk about briefly at the end of the presentation. But if any of you are already engaged with the Chinese flagship program, then that would give you preference when you apply for a Boren. So it slightly increases your odds of being selected for the award. And then the final one is ROTC. So if you are a member of ROTC, again, you're given that preference in the application process, which makes your chances slightly better than somebody who is not. To apply, there is an online application. Pretty much everything we advise on is an online application. Part of the online application is a self-assessment of your current skills in that language. Even if it's beginning, they want you to do a self-assessment of where you're currently at with that language. And if it's beyond beginning, what are the things that you've done, classes you've taken, or other things that you've done to get you to that level currently. Another component of that online application, beyond the basic stuff like your academic background and your contact information and that kind of stuff, is a program description and budget for your program. So you're awarded up to those amounts, but they want to see a detailed description and budget of the program that you've chosen. They're also looking for you to include transcripts from colleges and universities you've attended. And then Boren requires 2 letters of recommendation with an optional third one. So you do have to have 2 letters of recommendation, but you can have a third one. And we strongly encourage you to get all 3 if possible, because why not give just one more thing for the selection panelists to get to better know you as an applicant and consider you for the award. And then if you've already been learning the language to a certain degree, then they strongly recommend you also, in addition to the self-assessment, do an evaluation with a language instructor of that language. Okay, that's if you're beyond the beginning level, right? And then that's an additional document that can be included in your application as well. The meat of the application, what's going to take you the longest and what our support will be most handy for, although we can answer questions and give guidance with all of the other things too, is the essays. So there are 2 required essays with the Boren application. The first one is, they call it the national security essay. It's really where it's your chance to explain why the place that you're going and the language that you're learning is aligned with both your own individual academic and professional interests as well as national security. Okay, so it has to be a very specific alignment between the language and country, your academic and professional goals, and national security. So those kind of 3 things have to come together in Essay 1. And Essay 2 is about your motivation for the Boren program, for your language study, and for a public service career. Because again, there's that requirement you work with federal government. That's a public service career. So they want to hear about the specific skills, experiences, and abilities that you are bringing to the table that have motivated you to and prepared you for this kind of long-term language study overseas, as well as a future career in national security and public service. Right? So this is more of the what you've already done that would be relevant to this experience. And again, that's where our advising support comes in most into play, is in giving you guidance and feedback on those essays. So the application is open now. We do require for you to be considered for Boren in the current cycle. We have an intake deadline. What the intake deadline means is that you must have opened an application and had an initial or an intake appointment with an advisor in our office for this award to be considered in the current cycle. The reason why is because Boren does require nomination or endorsement from your university. So you do have to go through our office to be considered for that nomination or endorsement. And how you do that is first open an application and have an intake appointment with our office by December 5th. And then you're going to submit your complete application by the campus deadline, which is January 12th. That's what gets you considered for that campus nomination or endorsement. Then on the 15th and 16th will be campus interviews where you will be interviewed by a committee of staff and or faculty from the university with a particular background, expertise, or connection with the language and region that you're applying for. They will provide you with some feedback on your application. And then as long as you get that nomination or endorsement, which most of those who apply for it do, you have to then submit your final application. For undergraduate students, the scholarship deadline is January 21st. For graduate students, the fellowship deadline is January 28th. Okay, so you have a little bit after those campus interviews to finalize your application materials. And then notifications will go out in mid to late April on whether you've received funds to go abroad for the following academic year. So that in a nutshell is the Boren Awards. Now we're going to move on to the Critical Languages Scholarship. So completely different award, but also language focused. The Critical Languages Scholarship is funded by the Department of State. So their interest in learning these languages or helping students learn these languages has a slightly different lens to it. They're more interested in diplomacy amongst citizens, building strong connections and relationships between people of the United States and people of other countries. And so immersive programs and language programs are a way to do that. So again, it just both have a focus on that language learning, both have a focus on US interests, but a slightly different lens on how they approach that. So for the Critical Languages Scholarship, it is a fully funded summer immersion program. So it's not where you like pick the study abroad program and then apply for the funding for it. The program already exists. You apply for the language. And if you're selected, then you go to their institute to learn that language for 8 to 10 weeks. So most of the summer. And in that 8 to 10 weeks, because it's completely immersive, you will gain about 1 year's worth of language acquisition. This is open. Both awards are open to all majors and all levels of study, so undergraduate or graduate students, including in your final year of your studies. The languages offered last year for the Critical Languages Scholarship are the ones listed on the screen right now. I say that because the application hasn't actually opened yet for CLS, and so there may be changes in this, but I wanted to give you a sense of what it was based on last year. So there's Hindi, Indonesian, Persian, Portuguese, Swahili, Turkish, Urdu. So Portuguese can be a language for both of these programs, but you will not be going to Portugal. You won't be going to Western Europe for either of these programs. You would typically need to be going to like Brazil to learn the Portuguese. Those languages historically have all been open to beginners or any level of language learner in that language. Then Arabic, Chinese, Korean, and Russian are also offered, but they have typically required at least 1 year of previous study before you can be eligible for that. Now, that's by the time you go. So if you are currently in Korean 101 and will be taking Korean 102 next semester, then by the time you go abroad, you will have 1 year of academic study and you would be eligible. So you can apply in this cycle if during this current year you will be studying the language to get to that level. Japanese actually requires 2 years of previous study to be eligible. And if you have more advanced levels of any of these languages, you're still eligible, and the program will just take you to that next level in your language acquisition. So before I talk about CLS Spark, which you might have noted on the previous screen, which is a part of the CLS program, but a little different, I want to take a moment and introduce a special guest we have here today, and have them share a little bit with you about their experience in the CLS program. So we have a very distinct privilege here at ASU to have a CLS alumni ambassador who is one of your current ASU peers. Harrison Warden participated in the CLS program to Indonesia, not this past summer, but the summer before, and now is in a role with the CLS program as an alumni ambassador. So he's here to share the good word about the program and what their experience was like and all of that good stuff, and be a resource to any and all of you who are interested in applying to CLS now or in the future. So without further ado, Harrison, do you want to share with the group about your experience?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So, as Shay said, I participated in CLS in the summer of 2024 for the Indonesian language program in Malang, Indonesia. I'm currently a third year electrical engineering student here at ASU. Really quick, do we have any engineering students in the audience today? Wait, you guys can't unmute, can you? Okay. I'm just going to assume that we have some engineering students in the audience. Um, Programs like CLS and like Borin and like really all of these foreign language programs, there's kind of a stereotype that these programs are only for linguistics students or international relations students or students whose major is Chinese or Korean or Portuguese. That's not true. Okay, these programs are incredible opportunities for everyone, and they are open for every single major at every level of study. Specifically, as an engineering student, I think these programs are incredibly valuable. I'm going to focus on CLS because that's what I have experience with, but this is applicable to all critical language programs. So when you're studying a language, especially when you're at that beginning, intermediate level, advanced level two, you don't have all the tools at your disposal, right? You've been learning the language for maybe a year, maybe a week, and you have a really clear idea that you want to get across, whether that's a presentation you're giving in class or trying to order some noodles from a guy on the side of the road. But you don't have all the tools at your disposal, right? You have only been learning the language for a limited amount of time. So you can't express yourself in the same way as a native speaker. But that's fine, right? You have the words that you do know. So you use those, you try to get your point across, and then maybe some of it works, but some of it doesn't quite work. And so you use another word, you try to build on that, figure out what worked, what didn't, and keep iterating until you can finally get your point across and say, order your noodles or get your presentation. And if you think about it, that's what engineering is, right? As engineers, we don't have access to every single material in the world. If we did, there wouldn't be any problems to solve. And so I think that programs like CLS, like Borin, and like all of these other critical language immersion programs are incredibly useful, especially useful to engineering students. Um, because it's even if it's a different context, it's the same mindset, right? As engineers, you take an iterative approach. You use the tools that are available to you to build and build and build and build and finally get something that works. It doesn't need to be a perfect solution, but something that gets the job done. CLS program is incredibly rigorous. I don't want to like sugarcoat it. It's a very difficult program. I'm an electrical engineering student at ASU. Electrical engineering kind of has a reputation of being a difficult major. CLS is way more difficult than anything I've done here. That's not saying ASU is easy. It's just saying CLS is incredibly hard, right? EMAG 1, awful. CLS still somehow more difficult than EMAG 1. So I just want to prepare you guys that it's not easy by definition, by design, right? If they wanted an easy program, you'd be in the US doing Duolingo on your phone for a couple minutes and you'd learn some, but in order to get the massive language gains that CLS prides itself in, it's it's difficult, right? You're going to have homework every night, maybe 100, 200, 300 words on a topic. plus some pages from the textbook, some other activities to prepare yourself for class, and it all culminates in a final written written project that's I want to say 1,000 to 2,500 words, um, depending on language level, at least for Indonesian, and then also a 10 to 25-minute presentation on the topic that you researched. So it's not easy, but all of this work does an incredible job in developing not just your language skills, that should be obvious. I mean, it's literally in the name, but all of these other like soft skills that are, in my opinion, equally as important as the language abilities themselves. These programs are in foreign countries, right? They don't necessarily work the same way as it will in the US. You will need to be flexible. You will need to adapt. In my program, I was the only person in my class for a month because some of the people didn't get visas. There was a cyber attack on the Indonesian government. Word on the street is that the fourth largest country in the world was only using Windows Defender on all of their government systems, and someone hacked it. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but that is what I read. And so, because of some of these unexpected situations, you will need to adapt. You'll need to improvise, um, both on our end and also on the teacher's end, right? They were teaching classes on Zoom at night with the students who are still in the US so that they could still make some progress and be caught up when they finally arrived. And so programs like this really test your flexibility, they test your ability to adapt, and they improve that as well. And that's a useful skill for everyone, right? Not just language students, not just engineering students, but everyone needs to be flexible because in the real world, things don't always go to plan. And it's a good idea to be able to adapt to that. Aside from that, I think your writing skills and speaking skills and just ability to think about something and get a point across are very improved as well. I might not be the best example of that right now, but I certainly think that critical thinking and just your ability to write honestly are improved from programs like this as well. As for what the program is like on the ground, again, it depends on which country you're in, which language you're doing. These will be typically partnerships with the local university. So I was studying at the State University of Malang in Malang, Indonesia, a little college town that no one's ever heard of in the US. But if you do, say, Portuguese or Japanese or Arabic, you'll be in another country. So I think Arabic's typically in Oman, Portuguese is in Brazil, and they'll all be at local institutions, either language focused institutions or just more general universities. As for the classes, I found the very small classes to be incredibly useful. Even when everyone did get their visa, my class was three people and three teachers. So before they arrived, we had a 0.33 to 1 student teacher ratio. I think that might be a record for CLS, honestly. Not sure. But it really gets you this more individualized instruction and it keeps you on your toes, right? You can't really sit back and just let other people answer your questions when you're the only one in your class or there's only three people in your class. And so it's challenging, but it really pushes you to fully understand the language. And as was mentioned earlier, these are immersion programs. So not only will you be typically speaking 100% in your target language during class, I didn't even know my teachers spoke English. That was kind of a shock when I heard them speaking English to someone. It was like, oh, you do know how to do that. Okay. But at home, right? You'll be living either with a host family or I think sometimes in a dorm with local students. You'll typically be speaking your target language there. If you go to a cafe after class and you want to work on your homework, you'll be speaking your target language there. And actually, on the program, after the first 2 weeks for beginning students and during the entirety of the program for intermediate and advanced students, it's actually not allowed to speak English on campus. And so this immersion aspect is, in my opinion, what makes CLS work, what makes it effective in as was mentioned earlier, giving you an average of a year of language experience in 8 to 10 weeks. And so I just want to hammer home that these are difficult programs, but it's all worth it at the end. I'm sure if anyone here does CLS and they get back to the US, they'll be surprised at just how much they learned and they'll wish that they were back in their target country. I miss Indonesia every day. I think that's a pretty common experience. So I think that's it from me for now. If you have any more questions about CLS, I am a CLS alumni ambassador. Feel free to send me an email at wardenh@asu.edu, or check clscholarship.org. It's not cls.org, it's clscholarship.org, for more information on the program. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Harrison. Another thing I like to point out is that with a lot of the awards we advise on, there's the initial benefit that you gain, which as Harrison just went over, is far reaching in terms of the skills and experience that you're building. But there's also additional opportunities and benefits that you can continue to engage with once you've been a recipient of a lot of these awards, and becoming an alumni ambassador is one of those for the CLS program. So CLS Spark is a version of the CLS program in which you can specifically do beginning level study virtually in the languages that require 1 or 2 years of previous study. So if you're like, I really want to learn Chinese, that's the one that it most aligns with my interests and my goals, but I am not able to take any classes here at ASU in Chinese. I can't learn the language anywhere else except for through a program like this. Then you could apply for CLS Spark first and do a virtual version of it, which is still intensive, but you're not going to be getting the immersive part of it, right? Because you're not in a country where that language is being spoken at all times. But you still gain a significant level of language study in the virtual program. It's still going to be hard work and intensive on your part. And then you can be eligible for the in-person version in the following cycle. For for the past cycle, they actually gave you automatic semifinalist status if you had completed the Spark version of a language before applying for the regular in-person version. So it advances you through the application process a little bit, and guarantees you at least get to the second stage. You do have to prove that you don't have the opportunity to study that language at your home institution. ASU offers language classes in all of these languages, so there has to be a reason why you can't take those classes at ASU. Maybe you're an online student and they're only offered in person. Maybe you're a Tempe campus student and they're only offered on the Poly campus, and you can't get to the Poly campus for when the classes are offered. Maybe you're in an academic program where language classes don't fit into the schedule that you must take, right? So it all just depends, but there does have to be a reason why you can't learn the language at your home institution to get that year or two level to be eligible. Last year, it was a year-long online class or program. The previous year, it was a summer class. So it just depends. I'm not sure if the current cycle will be a summer version or a full year version for CLS Spark, but know that there should be a virtual option for gaining your 1 or 2 years of study in one of these languages. To be eligible, you do have to be a U.S. citizen or national at the time of the application. You do have to be enrolled as an undergrad or graduate student at a U.S.-based university. You do have to be at least 18 years old at the start of the program. So if you are one of our very young ASU students who has joined us early in life, you may not quite be eligible for this program yet. But maybe in the future. And also the great thing about CLS is you can participate more than once. That can be obviously for the virtual version and the in-person version, you can participate more than once combining those, but even with the in-person version, you can participate more than once, and that can be for the same language or for a different language, depending on what your goals and interests are. Because again, all of these programs do offer various levels of the language. They have the minimum required level that you can be at and that they offer, but they offer various levels throughout that. So whatever would make sense for you academically and professionally, you could go and participate again in the future, whether that be the following year or a year further out in the future, as long as you were still an undergrad or grad student when you applied. So the application is also an online application, but no nomination is required. So you don't have to do a special intake appointment or apply by the campus deadline. You should still work with our office on your application materials. We offer all of the same support we do with an award that requires nomination like Boren. You just don't have to go through that process. You may only apply for one language in a given cycle, and you may only apply for either Spark or the regular CLS in one cycle. You can apply for something else in a future cycle, but in one cycle, you have to make your choice of which language and program you're applying for. One of the nice things about CLS is it no longer requires a letter of recommendation, so you don't have that added component that you have to work on. And then there are multiple essays. I don't know what those essays will be because the application hasn't opened yet, but generally speaking, they're asking you to speak to your motivation for learning the language, your motivations academically and professionally, your preparation for doing an intensive, immersive abroad language program, and your ability and interest in being what they call a citizen diplomat, somebody who is going to have positive interactions while you're abroad to kind of build those diplomacy efforts at the ground level in an informal manner. So that's what the application entails. I just got a question. Do we have to be enrolled in as a student during the summer that we do it? No, you do not have to be enrolled in classes like at your university. You can already be graduated. So like you could apply this year and then graduate in May and participate this coming summer in the CLS program. So the application will be opening any day now. It will open sometime in October. I'm expecting it to open in the next week or so. The deadline will be sometime in November. It's usually open for about 6 or 7 weeks, the application. So it's a very small application window. So once it does open, you gotta kind of get started fast working on those materials. Semi-finalists will be notified usually around January, February. There is nothing additional at the semi-finalist stage. It's just letting you know whether you've progressed to that stage or not in the process. And then final notifications of whether you've been selected or not go out in March. And all of the institutes will have their own specific dates, but generally they are all going to begin sometime in June, usually early June. So those are the two main programs that are explicitly language focused that we're going to talk about today. However, there are a few other awards that if you are interested in going abroad and you are interested in gaining language skills, you may also be interested in, even if they're not explicitly language focused. So first, there's the Gilman International Scholarship, which is for undergraduate students to do credit-bearing study abroad programs while you're still an undergraduate student. To be eligible, you do have to be a Pell Grant recipient through FAFSA, though. And you don't have to be doing language learning on your study abroad program, but they do like to see people who are doing language learning. And if you are learning one of the languages that for the Gilman program is deemed of critical need, which overlaps with the critical languages scholarship, but it is not exactly the same as that list, then you can apply for a supplemental award as part of the Gilman program as well. Freeman Asia is to go to one of the participating Asian countries in that program as an undergraduate student with demonstrated financial need. They do not require that you be doing language study in one of those Asian countries when you go abroad, but they do like to see language learning being part of the program. That provides up to $7,000 for your study abroad programs, but they do have to be at least 8 weeks long. Fulbright is a program where you can go abroad to about 140 different countries across the world after you have a bachelor's degree and before you have a PhD, so anytime in that window. And you can either be doing academic study, which is typically a 1 year graduate degree program at a university in that country, or you can be doing an independent research or creative project, or you can be serving as an English teaching assistant in that country. Um, so it's not explicitly language focused again, but it would help you go abroad. If you're going abroad to a country where another language is spoken, you will be there. And so there will be a natural opportunity to practice and learn that language. But then some countries offer explicit support around language learning while you're there. And some countries even have a supplemental award that you can gain if you're going to be learning the language while you're there. Blakemore Freeman is explicitly language learning, but it is to Asian countries for after you have your bachelor's degree to do a year-long language intensive program in that country after you have your bachelor's degree. They do require you to already be at intermediate or advanced to be eligible for that. So you have to have already had some language learning. Could be a great option if you do like CLS for one of those languages as an undergrad and then do Blakemore Freeman in the future. But those are just a few of the other awards we advise on and ones that can specifically help you with further language learning. There's also some programs at ASU that can help you with language learning that we like to plug. And those students who do these programs often do very well in the competition for CLS and Boren. The first one is the Critical Languages Institute, or CLI, not to be confused with CLS, which is the national program we've already talked about. CLI is actually also a national program. We're just lucky that it happens to be offered here at ASU. It's through the Malikian Center for the Study of Russian, Eurasian, and East European Studies, and they offer summer intensives in the languages that you see on the screen right now, which there is some overlap with the CLS program, although they're not exactly the same, the languages that are offered between the two. You can be really at any level, beginning and above for these languages. They offer domestic and study abroad immersive programs. So if you're like, I want to learn Russian, I can't take Russian during the year, I want to apply for CLS in the future, you can do CLI for a summer here at ASU and then be eligible to go abroad either through CLS or CLI in the future to further your Russian skills. The domestic program does have a flat fee of $2,000, but there are generous scholarships for ASU students to cover that fee. And then obviously, if you're going to go abroad through CLI, there's more costs associated with going abroad. Also more scholarships or things that we advise on that you might be able to apply for, like Gilman, or I think that would be the main one for a CLI program, or Boren. The application for these programs opens October 1st, and they have a rolling deadline for the summer. However, they have a priority deadline in January if you're going to be applying for scholarship funding to cover the costs. And if you have further questions, our office, this is an ASU program, but we don't advise on it in our office. You would need to contact somebody at CLI, and there is the contact on the screen right now. And again, this recording and slides will be sent out to everybody who's in attendance. Another program offered here at ASU whose participants do very well in their applications for CLS and Boren. CLA is also an online application. The Chinese flagship program is a multi-year program for learning Chinese while you're here at ASU, as you are also learning whatever it is that you're majoring in. So it goes hand in hand with whatever your major program is. So they do have also scholarships for you to do language study over the summer, even though the program itself happens during the academic year. And they do have a requirement for your capstone to go abroad for a year, typically to Taiwan, where that language is spoken. So Chinese flagship students um, who also have a national security interest tend to apply for Boren for that capstone year. They have rolling admissions. You can get involved in that, apply for that program and get involved pretty much at any time. And there's a contact specifically for that program as well, Corinne Horton, because that's not something we advise on, but we work closely with them and the students that go through that program. Of course, you can also just be taking regular language courses here at ASU too in any number of languages. So if you are going to be applying for either the Critical Languages Scholarship or Boren or both this year, then you would work with one or more of our advisors in ONSA. You could work with Dr. Neela Bhattacharya on either Boren or CLS. You could work with Dr. Coyote Audamboni on either Boren or CLS. And if you are specifically applying as a graduate student for the Boren Award, you could also work with Dr. Mitch Hobza. So you can work with any one or multiple of these advisors through the application process. Please do not do it alone. We are here to support you. That is our job here at ASU. And so we want to help you. And those who go through the process with our office tend to get a little bit more out of the process of applying and tend to have a higher selection rate for these kinds of awards as well. So if you would like, you can go to this QR code or link, and then I'll also put the link in the chat and schedule an advising appointment with any one of these advisors for either the Boren or the CLS award. The advising will begin next week. Keep in mind, CLS still isn't open yet, so they're not going to be able to answer any questions about what the essays are, or is this language going to be offered this year, or how is CLS Spark going to run until that application actually opens. But advising appointments are available as of next week for either of these awards. So thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to see you all on Zoom, and I hope that we're going to be seeing some of you in some advising appointments here very soon.